Cardinal Truth, Chapter 7.
Today I want to talk about this term that we refer to as sonship. And it's often used as one of the pieces of ammo that people throw at us on their way out the door, or that people really latch onto and say, wow, that was really something amazing. It really broke me free of some stuff. I want to talk a little bit about it. I want to talk about my experience with it. And then I want to give you kind of my take on what the next generation needs in terms of sonship and daughtership and how we move from being sons and daughters to something else. This idea of sonship came out of the Father's Heart movement, which, if you're familiar with our charismatic stream, the Toronto outpouring was in the early 90s. And from that was this Father's Heart ministry, that the Father actually really loves us, that we're actually really loved by God. We have a God that really wants to interact with us. Jack Frost wrote a book, From Spiritual Slavery to Spiritual Adoption. It's the story of sonship. And in it, he uses this orphan analogy where he says that he's been an orphan in his thinking, where he's only trying to get his needs met, trying to get his wants filled. And he walks you through his process of becoming a janitor at a church and working his way up so that he could someday take the top seat and be the man. And just how the brokenness in his life continued to manifest. And it wasn't until he submitted and laid down his will and agenda to the agenda of his boss, his spiritual authority, natural father, that things actually started to uptick in his life. And shockingly, he had a revelation, was able to write a book, and went on to launch a huge ministry. We imported this idea about 10 years ago. And we were completely transformed as a church by this idea that we actually needed to lay down our agendas and submit to the agenda of someone else. And as it came under this idea, we realized how much of orphan mentality, I know that sounds like a hard word, but how much of this like thinking where we were just in it for us. And when we put our bags down at the feet of someone else and said, hey, my needs and my wants are secondary to the agenda that God has placed on the spiritual authority in my life, it became revolutionary. We actually got a whole bunch of people bought in, and we started to really change some lives. We created sons and daughters, which is amazing. And as we've gone through this, I'm looking now 10 years back, I realized that one of the critiques is that we often kept people as sons and daughters. We didn't always take them from orphan to adopted to teenager to parent and on. 15 years ago on August 18th, 2003, I held my daughter for the first time as a parent. And I realized that everything had shifted. And I think as we mature in Christ, now 15 years later into parenting and 4 other kids, I realized that I can't relate to my daughter and my sons in the same way that I relate to my spouse or even my dad. You see, I'm always going to be his son. I'm always going to be the son of my mother. And my kids are always going to be my sons and daughters. But the reality is that if I relate to them as a son or a daughter, then they're going to end up with a whole bunch of really bad baggage. And I'm really not interested in paying for their therapy to get out of that. Some weird codependent stuff from their dad. No, you see, as we mature, we have to become parents. The same is true in a church or a community. You have to evolve. And after you've learned this idea of sonship, you actually have to take a step and become a father or a mother and learn to parent the next generation because they're coming. That's the exciting thing. And I think one of the core things inside of me is this idea of discipleship. And I want to get to this in a later episode, but on its surface, discipleship is super hard today because I have every bit of information I could possibly want at the tip of my fingers if I just used my cell phone. Yet I'm missing authentic, challenging relationships that put me on the mat and actually bring me forward. You can't be a son in that relationship. You actually have to be a father. And what this world is calling out for are mature mothers and fathers who are interested in raising up the next generation of sons and daughters to become mothers and fathers, so that as we progress to be grandparents in the kingdom, our sons and daughters progress to be parents, and they foster in a generation that maybe isn't even born yet. Where's Sonship taken me? It's been a great ride. I think the next step is to become parents. And that's what I'm so excited about. If you've had a similar experience or you completely disagree with mine, why don't you click the link, send me something, send me a note, drop me a line. I'd love to respond. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed, please rate us and subscribe. All of the music was created and produced by Hello Wonder Music. You can find them at hellowondermusic.com. For more information about JD and the church he and Carrie co-lead, including our weekly podcast and upcoming events, please visit greaterchicagochurch.com.